gonna call the meeting to order. I will begin by reading the suggested disclaimer. In accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Information and connection links to the meeting are provided on the Town of Plymouth website at plymouth-nh.org. So I don't see Mark here. So that means, Steve, that you can be a voting member. We do have a full slate of, or full board now for the first time in a long time. So we have 7 members. So Steve, I invite you to be a voting member. I'm not sure what that means if Mark pops in a little late, but for now. Regardless, please, well, you're a voting member. So we will do a roll call. Phil.
Here.
Marianne.
Here.
Carl.
Here.
John.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
And Steve.
Here.
Now, here's a question. Since we have Bill Bolton here as a select board member alternate, can he be a part of the conversation as well as I just invited Steve? Does anyone know, or is that?
I don't think so. I think Marianne takes my, trumps me,
Okay.
Yeah, Bill can only go in, be an alternate for Marianne, but Mark just joined us also. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so Mark is here. So Steve, I revoke your voting privilege, but invite you to participate in the conversation. Bill, if you need to speak, we'll see what happens. So
I'm still a resident of the town of Plymouth, so I might have.
That is true. Yeah. Okay.
We do invite alternates to contribute, and as an alternate from the Board of Selectmen, I think Bill's contributions would be welcome.
All right. That's good.
All right. Well,
June's kind of smiling at that one, but
yeah.
All right.
Let's begin tonight, or continue the conversation of the evening on focus on the minutes from February 4th. I had a couple comments, or maybe a question about our revision to the bylaws, and wondering if we need to actually spell out what those specific revisions are in the minutes themselves. Does that need to be reflected in the record, or is just mentioning that we've got some revisions and the previous version and the current version will be enough to spell out what those differences are? Does anyone have a? I'm fine with the way they are. I just want to make sure we've got enough detail. I think we're more than covering our bases with the bylaws. So, right.
Feel okay with it.
Okay, great. Other comments, edits to the minutes? Perhaps a motion of some sort.
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Carl. Okay, I will read the roll. If you're in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Phil.
Aye.
Marianne.
I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Thank you. Carl.
Aye.
Mark.
Well, I left early, so I'm going to abstain as well, because I'm not sure exactly what happened at the end of the meeting.
Now I'm counting. John. John?
Aye.
Thank you. Mike?
Abstain.
Thank you. And Rebecca, me, I think that gives us a quorum of votes, right? 1, 2, 3. Huh. That's three votes, and did I get that right? Oh no, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're good.
We have a quorum of voting members present. I think it's just a simple majority of.
Right. Okay. For some reason, that always confuses me. Okay. So Minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, I'd like to invite the public to speak on anything unrelated to tonight's agenda, not related to any of the applications or any of the public hearings that are before the board this evening. So anything of a more general nature. Okay, seeing no indication that anyone wishes to speak, we will move on to acknowledgement of communications received. And that is the town of Thornton's notice for their site plan review application for a telecommunications tower. And it sounds like, looks like that public hearing is happening right now. So I think it's on Upper Mad River Road in Thornton. Any discussion from the board about this, the cell phone tower in Thornton? I believe the state statute is at what, 40-mile radius around any cell tower, and towns are required to notify other towns. So, okay, we are just blowing through this. New business. We're gonna try a sort of looking at our site plan review applications in a slightly different way than what we have done in the past. This is going to be a little more in accordance with our bylaws. So we will look at any new applications before us, make a ruling on their completeness, and we'll do that for all the applications that we are looking into accepting that night. And then we will move on to a public hearing for each of those applications. That's pretty clearly noted in the agenda. So new business, we have a site plan review application from Riverside Landing, PID number 212-046, a review and acceptance of an application to excavate and place fill to create development pad to support continued commercial development. This is we looked or approved an application from this applicant for this site a year, 13 months ago, but there's been some significant changes, and it's outside of the window of when they can make changes to that site plan. So we're looking at this again. And I will note to the applicant that we have almost a brand new board since last year. So there's a lot of new folks on the board that weren't here for this previous application. So I will invite the applicant in a moment to speak give a brief presentation about this project, paying specific attention and bringing and noting any the adherence to the checklist in the site plan review regulations, any waivers that you're looking for, and then we'll be able to make a ruling on whether we can accept the application as complete. So, Will, would you like to go ahead and make a brief presentation and talk about the checklist in the site plan review form?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so I can would be best for me just to share my screen. I can walk through our plans. And let's see here. Right now, you're probably looking at yourselves. Let me see. Let me get that. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see that? Yes. Okay. I'm seeing head nods. Okay. So to orient everyone, this is the site on Tenny Mountain Highway across from Highland Avenue that has the Market Basket, McDonald's, etc. That's what we were considering phase one of this development. So this project is looking at a phase two. So this is the existing conditions of the site. So Tenny Mountain Highway runs here. As I mentioned, so you come in, McDonald's is here, Bank of New Hampshire, the Fairfield Inn and Suites, the State Liquor Store, Market Basket, and the Common Man over here. So that's the existing development that's been approved to date. There's a flood compensation area out in the back between the development and the Baker River. And the proposed new area of development is over in this area here. As Rebecca mentioned, we got this approved with the town about 13 months ago, and since then I've been pursuing a DES wetlands impact permit. We received approval for that, but as part of that, we had to make some pretty major modifications to the plan to adjust some of those impacts. So let me zoom out here a little bit. Okay, so this is an overview plan that shows a conceptual plan of development along with the proposed grading and some wetland creation areas. So what you're looking at here is obviously this is the existing development over here, and then it would be connected in some form or fashion this way. What I'd like to make clear here is that this is a concept master plan. What we're asking for is approval to do the fill and the excavation necessary to prepare the site. Once final end users are ready to move in here, then we'll be coming back for an approval to do a plan that'll show the pavement, the building, the detailed drainage that's needed. So let me see. Let me go to the plan that actually shows that. So this is the sheet that shows what we're asking to gain approval for, which is to construct a pad in this shape here. It has a stone line slope along some of the steeper sections. There's a culvert in here, a box culvert that will convey the runoff that comes from this culvert that goes under Tenny Mountain Highway out into what's called the Oxbow. So this existing wetland in here is an oxbow that was it's been created over time, and that's part of our impact. So this area will be impacted here. The modification to the plan, it used to look more like a squared off rectangle, and so DES wanted us to work to preserve this section of the oxbow in here. It has some high value wetland in there, and so what's happened is we're proposing this box culvert and then a constructed wetland to essentially create a new section of oxbow along the backside here and connect to the old one. And we have some details of that in the plans as well, which I can go over. But the other thing that we're doing is out in the flood compensation area. So this area in here is excavated or will be excavated. A portion of it has already been excavated, probably 2/3 of it back in the back here, in order to compensate for the impact to the base flood elevation for the Baker River. So by placing fill here, we have to excavate here to make sure that we're not increasing the flood levels downstream or upstream. So these three areas are excavated areas that are going to be open water wetlands along with shallow wetlands and some other non-aquatic wetlands as well. And that's kind of part of the mitigation for those impacts. What else can I tell you? There's another plan here. So also as part of the DES approval, Mike has agreed to donate 2 parcels of land to be conserved by the town. This parcel over here, we've called the Clay Brook parcel. It's a little over 24 acres with frontage on the river. It also has frontage on Clay Brook, which kind of provides most of the boundary between these two parcels. And then this parcel over here is about 31 acres, calling it the Hannigan parcel. And that area also has a significant amount of frontage on the Baker and some floodplain areas in here. So this again shows the master plan. We are showing a driveway here onto Tenny Mountain Highway. Once the development gets underway, we will need to get approval from DOT for a new driveway permit. There's an existing permit at this location, but it'll be, I think it's expired and it'll be a new permit. But DOT is aware of the project, and in order to do the fill out in here, we don't need the DOT permit unless we start doing work within the right of way. I can show you briefly this. So this is kind of a summary of the those created wetlands out in the flood compensation area. So it shows the plan view up here, and then this is a section which has some details on what's going to be done. So it's a pretty significant project to do a lot of wetland plantings and creating a lot of mixed habitat and vegetation. And then there's also this plan which shows this is the oxbow creation plan. So this is the grading for the oxbow, and then we have a couple of sections as to what's going to be planted in the various areas. So I think, so I guess otherwise, the project is going to need an alteration of terrain permit. We had applied for that originally when we submitted the wetlands permit about a year ago. And we kind of just basically, because of the review with wetlands, it's been pushed off until we had the wetland approval. So we'll be applying for that alteration of terrain permit. As part of that, we prepared a flood study analysis that shows no impacts to the base flood elevation based on the grading that we've shown here. That will be provided to the town and to the state as part of that application. I think that is a brief overview. I'm sure people will have questions. I know, Rebecca, you mentioned that this is kind of a new board, and so I'm just going to kind of keep it brief, and then we can kind of dive into whatever specific areas you all would like to. I'll turn it back over to you, Rebecca, for now.
Thanks, Will. This was actually really helpful to be walked through the plans one at a time. Will, do you mind stopping the screen share and we can just reshare as needed? Thank you. So just want to bring this back to the board. We have to make a ruling on the completeness of the application. So I want to focus any questions we have for the applicant to the checklist. And June, I'll ask you real quick, is there, you said this in your report, but in your opinion, does this meet all the requirements of our site plan regs?
Yes, I think the one piece that might be considered to be missing, but is really around the flood elevation, but that's not necessarily specific in our checklist. It's something that we can kind of require as an alternative. We know they need to get it for the alteration of terrain permit. We know that, as long as that would be forthcoming in the future, but in order to take this next step, I mean, it would be very common for the board to say that this is complete enough to start the review and do some analysis of this, and then perhaps as a future condition ask for an alteration of terrain permit, before work starts. So
Great. Okay. Questions from the board about the completeness of this application?
One of the questions I had deals, is there a surface elevation for the Baker River or the mean high water for the Baker River on the plans? Anywhere?
So the Baker, is a river, and so there are sections, and it varies obviously as you move downstream. So there's not a static base flood elevation. It varies as you move downstream, and I think June's point's correct. I don't think we show it on the plan, but we definitely have that information, and we have a study on that, which we will provide. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the board on the completeness of the application? And also, since we do have some new members here, we haven't done a whole lot of application review in the past couple months. So if there's any process questions or anything like that, just jump in and we help clarify as we go through this process. So. Okay. If there are no comments or questions about the completeness of the application, perhaps somebody would like to make a motion to accept the application as complete.
Happy to make a motion to accept the application as complete.
I'll second.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, we'll read the roll. If you are in favor of accepting this application as complete, please say aye. Phil?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And Rebecca? Aye. Okay, so application is complete. So we'll just roll right into since we've kind of got Will in the hot seat right now, we'll just roll into the public hearing for this application. Now is a time to ask more content and substantive questions about, things about this application. We'll also open it up to a public hearing in a moment, but I just want to see if the board has any questions about this application beyond the completeness.
Since I'm new, can I just get some clarification? So it looks like, I think, Will, you said there was 2 parcels of land, one on each end, that would be given to the town, and that there was a note in June's report about a trail, a river trail. Is there any information that anyone, I'm assuming maybe the trail connects these 2 parcels, or is that not established? Or I'm just curious about that part of it.
Sure. So on our plan, I can share this again real quick. And I can show you. So on this plan, you can see this dark dashed line here. You see that?
Yep.
Around the perimeter. Basically what's been proposed is that the project will provide an access down to the flood compensation area elevation, so this lower elevation here. So the project, as part of this fill and what's being proposed, will provide like a bluestone or gravel walk down to a certain point right here. At which point the town, or our understanding of what we discussed previously, is that the Conservation Commission or the town would then take on designing and constructing a trail in approximately this location. Essentially kind of going into the wooded section along the bank of the Baker and making its way over to this parcel, which is one of the conserved parcels.
And the ownership of the conserved parcels will remain with Riverside Landing. The town will hold the conservation easement. Is that correct?
I think that is correct.
Want me to jump in? Well,
Go ahead, June. Yeah, thank you.
This was a big question, and I was talking to Bill Bolton about this today too. So, conservation easements are complicated, but in general, the owner of a parcel cannot also hold a conservation easement. It has to be another party that holds the easement. And there was, over the last year, I spent the other day quite a few hours going through the record over the past year of what was intended, and it's very confusing. But it's kind of at this point with this phase of this development, it's time to figure it out and get it done. So anyways, I've been in touch with the developer and the developer's attorney, and it was actually, I thought it was the attorney, but I just looked up the email, it was from the wetlands consultant. And I apologize for not including this with the applicant to the with the application to materials to the planning board. But that wetlands consultant said that the two easements areas will be held by the town of Plymouth, owned by Riverside Landing, and the New Hampshire DES Wetlands Bureau will be the secondary conservation easement holder. And then she wrote, the DES does not like it when the easement is also owned by the same entity, and thus DES was requesting that Riverside maintain ownership while the town is the primary easement holder, and New Hampshire DES will be a secondary backup holder. So this is a typical arrangement that they do for wetlands mitigation projects, because it falls under their aquatic mitigation issues. And so they have drafted two conservation easements following the state's model. I have those, but I didn't bother to send them to you guys because they still need quite a bit of work. So that was one of my recommendations, that in the next few weeks here, we figure out what the terms are of those easements. There's lots of different components to work on for that with the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, but it can be done. So the long story, to answer the question that Mark had, was that the two parcels, and I can do a quick screen share because I actually had this, whoops, I gotta remember do this right. If you don't mind, let's see. This one, I'm not a very, whoops, I gotta move you guys around. This picture here, which Will showed, I just colored in these two yellow areas are going to be where the conservation easement is, but then there also should be another easement that designates some aspects about this trail, about what the uses are, the location, the width, that kind of thing. There's a thing called trail easement, so I think there should be a third additional easement that needs to be clarified and kind of finished at this point. So does that help?
What else does the board have as far as questions and comments about this application?
I guess I'm kind of curious about the bank elevation. Getting back to the river elevation, do we have any spot elevations on the bank? I see that one of the contours shows that it looks like we're up at 480, very close to the river. Do we, and so my concern is that it appears that the flat area of wetland looks like it's at 468. I'm curious, is that below the bank? How far below the bank is that, or is it roughly surface water level?
Yeah, no. So the Baker is up a little higher, up higher than that. So the banks of the Baker are, you're right, it's around 470 or 486, 485, I think. And the flood compensation area, the big flat area out there is about 468 or 469, I believe, is the bottom of it. And the pad that we're proposing is about 488. And the finished grade of that, once the select materials and pavement are in would be closer to 490 or 489. I think the buildings are all about at 490, which is above the flood elevation.
I do recognize I'm new to the board and this has been in the works for a while. I'm more than a little concerned about the potential for the river to kind of under flood conditions to erode the bank and make a new channel through that low area. Has that concerned you at all, Will?
Well, I mean, it's been working for a while like this, and we're maintaining a 75-foot buffer between it, and so it actually backfills, so it doesn't come. It doesn't fill in from the left to right. It kind of fills in from the right to the left. So it doesn't
from the
come in from the upstream end of it. So, I mean, it's definitely something we've looked at, but it's we're comfortable with this design. We think that it's going to provide a stable flood comp area.
Other questions and comments from the board?
I would like to compliment the design on the wetlands. It looks like they're, designing wetlands to mimic natural wetlands is a challenge, and it looks like you've got a great start on it. It's hard to see the detail on paper, but the contours look creative. It looks like it would mimic, a floodplain with some oxbows and horseshoes. So, from an appearance standpoint, it looks creative.
Actually, I'll credit Cindy Balsius with Stony Ridge. That she did most of that design. So that's the wetland scientist that June was referring to earlier. So
I also appreciate the DES, with an eye towards trying to maintain as much contiguous wetland as possible. So it looks like you guys have done a ton of work since we saw you last year. So. All right, so I am buried in a pile of paperwork, but just want to bring up so we did have the town engineer, Mike Bidnali, take a look at this. It's actually the shortest list I've ever seen him generate after review of an application. So Will, probably the same for you as well. So did you get a chance to, Will, did you get a copy of the letter from Mike?
I did. You want me to kind of step through it?
That would be great.
Okay. So I did try to call Mike. We haven't been able to connect just to talk about these, but I think that these are certainly things that we can work out with him. So the first comment looks like it's just to kind of explain to you all what we're proposing, and just to clarify that there's no building or pavement proposed as part of this approval. Number two, he's asking for the test pit logs, which we will provide to Mike. We have them. They just aren't on the plans because they're in a separate package. The third one is in reference to the floodplain fill and mitigation analysis, which we have and are finalizing now in a form that we can get to Mike and the state. And we provided him with the same report in the last iteration of this project. So he's reviewed the same type of report from us. So he's familiar with that. And same thing with AOT. AOT will also review and comment or approve on that report. Number four, grading at the north end of the box culvert. He's right. There was an error with the model on our grading there. So we're going to take a look at that and make a modification there. We need to extend the head wall of that box culvert. So thanks, Mike, for catching that. And then the fifth one is the existing driveway was just noted. He's just noting that we need to get a new driveway permit for DOT once we decide it's time to construct that. So we concur on that one. That's
That
it.
all seems to be fairly straightforward. Anything from the board on the engineer's report? Okay. Just looking at the report we got from the staff report, the note that I'm just going to read this, I'm sure we already have read it, that the changes on this current plan will alter 2 approved site plans, but there's no requirement for those 2 site plans to be amended because of this. I want to get back to that trail easement for a moment, and I'm wondering, Will, as far as you know, is that something that the Riverside Landing would be willing to include as part of this package?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Mike has talked about with the Conservation Commission in the town for the past couple of years, as part of the project. So, designating an easement there is certainly part of the plan. I will say what he is hoping is that the town will carry a liability policy on that, and would name Riverside Landing and Mike as a additional insured as part of that process. So that's something that I think he'll be bringing up as we finalize the easement. I think, and then the Conservation Commission or the town, however you all designate, can kind of finalize the design and construction of it, or implement it, marking of it. I think that the idea is that it's in that general area, and it's not really, I don't think Mike's going to get super picky about exactly where it ends up, as long as it's in that general area.
Yeah, in my experience, trail easements, are important, because if Riverside Landing changes hands and we've just got a verbal agreement on this trail and it hasn't been built yet, that means that, we've lost something that was really a part of this agreement. So definitely important. And the ones that I've seen definitely will set up they don't have a trail that actually exists yet. We'll set up kind of like, the trail's going to be between here and here. Here's who can build it. Here's who will likely maintain it. This is the material it can be. These are the restrictions. It can have, no motorized, or, things like that. So making sure that we're on the same page with those things is important. And then parking as well. So making sure that there is some sort of provision for ensuring that in the next phase of development that there is some, some parking available to make this trail, or to make this trail accessible to folks. So.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
I'm just curious here. So looking at the potential trail easement there, would that presumably also extend then west into the conservation area? And is that a separate easement then? Just for clarification. And I see it ends like right, behind the market basket area as it's drawn here. Would it extend into that other region as well?
Right. So I think, and maybe June and Rebecca can answer this question better than I can, but I think the intent is certainly to be able to connect to that parcel. And then I would assume that the language for the easement on that parcel would allow for trail creation and connection to that existing trail. I think that's the intent. So does that sound about right, June?
Yeah, what I would usually in a conservation easement, it would allow, it sets up what permitted uses are. And then so we would want to make sure in that conservation easement that there is, recreational access, and it can be kind of specified in a certain area or throughout the whole parcel too, and defining what types of recreation, motorized, non-motorized is most typical, but sometimes now with mountain bikes, they can be a very different impact than traffic. So we may want to there's some questions to, and how many trails, how many miles, where they are, that kind of, what's the extent of the trails, but that would be listed really in that terms of the conservation easement, because one of the purposes is to conserve wetlands, but it also may allow some recreation as long as it doesn't impact the wetlands. So.
And as far as the insurance issue goes, that fortunately is beyond the scope of this board. So I think we'll let the select board determine that. But that will be part of the agreement, I would imagine, as well. So.
I have a maybe for Jude or for the select board representative, but I'm curious, does the town hold other conservation easements, and is there a cost or responsibility associated with enforcing those that is borne by the town over time?
I can answer that because of doing some work on this the other day. I know of at least one other conservation easement that the town, actually there's one actually up behind Walmart that was a wetlands impact easement. And then the town from years back has a conservation easement on Green Acre Woodlands lands up around Plymouth Mountain. So there are responsibilities. You basically have to monitor the activities of the landowner to make sure that they are not violating any terms of the conservation and what's being conserved. So there typically is sort of an annual monitoring that gets done. Often there should be reporting of that on a periodic basis. Some files kept. That's really becomes most typically the responsibility of the Conservation Commission. So yes, there has been other easements. Well, there may be additional ones, that those are the two that I'm aware of in town.
I was just reading through the report of the Conservation Commission to see if they do any reporting on that in the town.
Yeah, and then the other part was about the cost and that kind of thing. There was as part of it, I think it's specified in the wetlands permit. I'm drowned in paper here too, but that's and I know that the applicant Riverside Landing has agreed to give the town $5,000 for each parcel, so total of 10 to help with that monitoring responsibility. So typically that might get held in an escrow account and carried on from there. So okay,
thank you.
I gotta take a phone call.
That's pretty typical in a conservation easement too, is to provide some sort of stewardship fund. So it also helps to enforce the terms of the conservation easement into the future. So
somewhere back in the back of my brain, I recall thinking that there was some responsibility of holders in enforcing, and again, it's usually, and it may not be the current landowner that is an issue, but sometimes properties can be sold, and future landowners may not be quite as familiar with the conservation easement and the conditions thereon.
And because the easement holders are enforcing the terms of the easement, that's why you don't necessarily want the property owner and the easement holder be the same person or the same entity, because it can be a conflict of interest. So
thank you.
Okay. Unless there's any questions right now or comments from the board, I'm going to open up the public hearing for this application. Does that work for the board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it is 7:14, and I'm going to open up a public hearing for this. If you wish to speak, we don't have a ton of participants, but if you'd like to speak of any nature about this application, please go ahead and take yourself off mute and take a moment to state your case. I'll just give it a second. All right, it is still 7:14. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. I think if we were to consider approving this application this evening, I think there's certainly some conditions that we would need to put on this. There's the standard state and federal permits, the AOT, looks like we've got the water and sewer connection. I think we probably need to see the engineer's remaining issues, because it sounds like, Will, you said you don't need a driveway permit because there's no construction, no building construction happening at that point. Is that right?
Well, I think just what I'd like to clarify is if we did do the fill in the right of way, we would need a DOT permit for that. But a large portion of this project could be done without that permit in place. So, we don't need the DOT approval unless we start doing that driveway construction right in the right of way. The other thing I guess I would point out is I know that it was noted that we needed a water and sewer connection permit, but we don't. We're not proposing any water or sewer connections at this time. We will once we come back, once we have a building and a plan, we will need it then.
Okay. So, the water and sewer service connection, that will take place in subsequent phases. Right?
Well, when we come back to you the next time with an actual building and a parking area, a building that needs water and sewer, then certainly that will require the main extensions and the service connections. So, June, I guess I just wanted to clarify that on this staff report, unless you have a different opinion about that.
I do have a question, Rebecca, if that would be appropriate at this time. I'm wondering if Will can share his screen and show us the box culvert that the town engineer identified as being off, and maybe highlight what you plan to do to rectify that, because it seems like that being one of the main outstanding issues identified by the town engineer, that might be one of the only things that would cause me to hesitate approval sooner than later basis.
Share that. Okay. So this is the end of the box culvert, the outlet. This right here is the head wall that is part of that construction. And these lines are the topography, so this is the slope that goes down. See what you see here is this topo is not tying into the head wall. So we need to reorient the head wall in the drawing and just make sure that it's going to capture all the slope is basically what he's getting at.
Seems pretty minor. Thank you.
What I'm saying. Yeah. Okay.
This is actually, I mean, we've been on Zoom for a year now. I don't think we've been able to see plans quite this clearly for whatever reason. We haven't seen a lot of applications, but I can actually see the plans better than I think I can when we're all sitting around the table. So I think I'd love to see us have some sort of big screen once we're back in the same room together to be able to zoom into this stuff, because this is really helpful to see that. Otherwise, we all be flipping through giant sheets of paper. Which do make great wrapping paper, by the way. But anyway. Okay. So just going through kind of what we need, the challenge of granting conditional approval is if that list gets too long, then it just becomes kind of unmanageable. And so the list I have is the AOT permit, receipt of the AOT permit as a condition, driveway permit if there's construction within the right of way. All right. I have document compliance with all floodplain and floodway impacts, which sounds like that just might be getting a couple things on the plans, but it's really in the AOT package anyway. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. It's a whole, it's a study. It's a booklet of data on the HEC-RAS analysis, and then a narrative report and all that. So that we'll get that to Mike as well as the state. I think that is a explicit requirement of the AOT approval. So, just making the AOT a condition, that's a part of it. As well as, I would imagine a condition is going to be that we get Mike to sign off on his comments as well. And that, it's covered both ways.
Right. All right, so review conservation easement by town of Plymouth attorney to be paid for by the applicant, working with planning staff on establishing escrow agreement for this review. I'm reading through this and probably don't need to. Easements need to be approved by planning and development director, planning board, conservation commission, and select board. And then the completion and execution of these easements needs to happen before construction. And I believe that's a condition of the, or at least for the conservation easement, that's a condition of the wetlands permit.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So Rebecca, I would just amend my comments here. I think in terms of the timing, and one thing you might want to ask the applicant is what is their intention in terms of starting work, because the trail easement could take a little bit longer to work out. So we could start with we know those conservation easements have to be in place before they can commence work. So maybe the trail easement we could work on, by July 1st or something, if that, but we don't know when they're intending to start work.
Right. I mean, I can, I think Mike's on the call, but I don't know if he can unmute himself. So I think my understanding is that it's not imminent. We still have to get through alteration of terrain, and there's not, an immediate end user. So I think that time frame sounds reasonable, June. I think that'd be fine.
Okay, and so the trail easement as well, just make sure and this is something I mentioned, who's responsible for building the trail, what are the restrictions on the trail? I think that can all be established within the trail easement itself. But make sure that the location of the trail easement is shown on the final plan as well.
And also in terms of the timing of the duration of the approval, I know June had mentioned the potential to extend it past a 12-month approval, because it's possible that this project won't be ready to actually go to construction within 12 months, and we'd rather not have to do this again, I guess. So if the board would consider what June had mentioned, which was basically granting approval for construction to start before fall of 2022, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I think, well, we're sort of getting towards crafting a motion. Is that something the board would consider, to give a longer approval so that we're not putting the applicant through having to go through this again with a new board? If there are substantial changes to the plan, you'd have to come back to us anyway, but it would be just an amendment to an open site plan. Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah, okay.
What would be considered substantial changes?
I think what we saw tonight is, I can't remember if you were here for the last one, substantial, I mean, Will, you might be able to expound on this better than I can, but, or maybe June.
I mean, I think in the end, probably June would make that decision. I think, for this plan, obviously there was a significant change in the fill location. The wetland impacts were different. So, I mean, I think it's just, I don't know if there's actually a definition, it's just something that I guess Mike and probably June would have to agree upon, or I don't know. What do you, June, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. I was just quickly thumbing through our regulations. Probably could give better clarity about what that means, something to work on in the future. But if we're really going to see fill in a different place as a result of the alteration of terrain permit, if that really changes that configuration substantially, on the edges and kind of refining it, I think would be fine. But if it really kind of reshapes it in a significant way, that adds in different culverts or more culverts or something like that, or then and also anything that would trigger a change to the wetlands permit is then going to kind of have to come back to us too. So, but I would expect it would be fairly straightforward for that state approval. I guess when I put on my suggestion here about if you wanted to go for a longer period of time, I said fall 2022. I would suggest picking a date, because beginning and end of fall, there's a 3-month window there. So
yeah, I mean, we could potentially just say it's what is this, February? And thinking of 20 months from now. Does that make sense? So that would put us into October 18th, or the end of October, something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing dates around. I can keep doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the latest that things would want to get started would probably be right before Thanksgiving. So if we could get it through the end of November, I think that would be
I
plenty.
would be confident that if we issued approval with for the plan with substantial progress to begin within 24 months, I would feel comfortable with that. That gives them a little margin of error if they need it.
Okay. What do other board members think? 24 months make sense?
I suspect if they don't start within 24 months, they're going to have bigger issues that they'll probably have to come back for.
Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm sure that Mike's definitely would like to start before 24 months, so that should be fine.
Okay. June, do you want to talk about the development agreement? That's on the list, or do you want to save that for?
Well, I think, sure. I
Now that
did send you via email a sample development agreement. So this is something that the town's used before. This board probably hasn't seen it recently. And I did double check this with our town attorney because it was something that he drafted years ago, and I just wanted to make sure, is this still valid? Is this still the good approach? And he concurred that yes, it is, and thought the language with one edit in that sample that was in the note was fine. So what this does is it basically creates a way to sort of set up a agreement between the town and the applicant. And that first section, you put in any conditions of approval, just like it's on a notice of decision, but it also pulls in other language that, just sets up some other kinds of contractual things that are standard, but it puts it all in one place is the best way to put it. Rather than thumbing through, like, what do the site plan review regulations say? We might amend the regulations 2 more times in this next 24 months. So you kind of have to go back and, it basically just pulls out like what we want, what our expectations are for this approval. And it adds in those conditions, and it also has some additional sort of standard conditions saying that, we have this agreement. Usually a performance bond would be appropriate to collect. And so that was just sort of a standard piece because we don't want to see this site get opened up and then have the developer walk away and then just be left with a kind of a mess. So usually you want some kind of performance bond or letter of credit that would allow the town to go and hire a contractor to go in and either finish the work or restore it to some means that would be stable. And that's consistent. We'd want to be able to hire a consulting engineer during construction to just make sure they're filling and dredging where they say they were going to. And then it's also is a good place to establish this period of time that this approval might be good for, and put in there that they have 30 days prior, they could ask for an additional extension perhaps. So I gave you that draft. Maybe it's something I wanted to talk about in a work session about how we might use these further, but we have this type of a development certainly is substantial enough that this gives them some good protections to the community.
I think we can certainly look into this now. This does represent a change for how we've been operating, certainly in my tenure on the board. So I'm not sure if we want to look into this further. So we're ready for the next application that comes to us with a development agreement. I think it's a great idea. Love to hear any other board members chime in about whether or not we want to try and implement this for this application, or if we want to try and save it for workshop through it a little bit so we can implement it in the future.
I'd rather not force it at this point. I'd rather have a little time to get more familiar and work through it before we subject this applicant to our learning process.
Just be concerned, once again, the size of this project, if it came to be that they weren't going to go any further, we would be stuck with this hole. It seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Marianne. I also agree with Phil that it's, I feel like it's kind of changing, maybe a little too abruptly how we've been doing business for a while. So I think it's important. I don't know. What do other folks think?
Is it something that could be implemented a little bit later in some form, not necessarily the entire thing, but in some form so that it fits with this project?
It sounds like we need to make this a condition of approval. So it sounds like it's either we have a number of options tonight, and I'm not making an assumption that we will issue an approval this evening, but it seems like we have to have this figured out upon approval of this project. Am I understanding that right, June?
That's a good question. Typically a condition of approval would state, and you're asking the applicant or requiring a development agreement to be established. So while this is a sample, there may be a little bit of go back and forth with the applicant. I mean, they may disagree. Sometimes their attorney might not like a piece of the language, but we work it out. So I think, you could choose to use the sample that I provided with you. And I do know that, I apologize that it was so late coming, but one thing at a time. Again, we used to use these for large proposals number of years back. And John Radigan, our town's attorney, looked this over. I talked to him yesterday and he said, yeah, absolutely. It's still a really, his recommendation is you want to have this kind of agreement in place.
So we wouldn't actually have to write it right now.
No.
Okay.
You could ask me to work on it with the applicant, and
Okay.
and based on this sample. So,
What do other board members think?
Personally, I like the idea of this agreement very much. I do think it's a good idea in safeguarding the community. I do wonder about, and I'm not sure where this leads me to, like, fall on one side or the other, but about introducing it into the process at this point when we haven't really been talking about it yet. And so I do like the idea of using this. I just wonder about introducing it into the process without much warning at this late of a date. But it's not that late yet. We haven't started working, but I don't know exactly where I fall, but that's like the one thing that's going on in my head right now. There's a little bit of Phil's concern about like us kind of figuring it out while we're putting someone else through it. And I kind of see both sides of this. I don't know where I fall exactly.
I kind of agree with that and with what Phil said. I think that, if we're going to put someone through this, we ought to make sure that our I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we, put Will and his client through that. So I guess that's kind of what my stance would be, that until we have it all figured out on our end. It's hard to put them, makes me feel we're making them a little bit like the guinea pig to go through the process for the first time.
Though we do have a lawyer, and they've.
Mike or Steve, do you have anything to add to this? It's okay if you don't. I'm just trying to, I think it seems like we're kind of leaning towards, we'll figure this out at our next work session. But yeah, Steve, you just unmuted yourself, so go ahead if you have something to add.
Yeah, I appreciate the level of consideration everyone's giving it. I think I'm comfortable if the town's attorney in June could work with something that we have used in the past and it doesn't hold anything up for the applicant.
When was the last time we used this type of agreement with an applicant?
If you're asking that question, then it's been a while.
Yeah. I mean, I know that this has been brought up before. The first time I remember brought up was when Fugaki was doing their site work, which was going to be pretty extensive. And the question was, well, what happens if they just kind of walk away from it? And their response was, we're putting this kind of money into just the site work, you bet we're going to try and finish it. We're going to finish it. And if we don't, if we walk away, you know, there's a pretty nice piece of improved property along Tenny Mountain Highway. So plus am I getting, is this the line of thinking that we're going on? I mean, am I off base with my thinking?
I mean, I think you're right that, yeah, there's a big investment on the part of a developer, but the problem is it's not just their intentions, it's unforeseen circumstances that can then put our community at risk. So especially in an area where we've got, pretty extensive wetland impact, and no building construction that's part of it, that ultimately we've exposed and developed a big portion of land. And if something, I'm just making stuff up now, but if, something were to happen and, they can't move forward with construction, or something happens midway and I don't even know what might happen. It leaves us exposed as a community. So I think that agreement is designed to protect the community so that we're not exposed to more risk. So,
I think this, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I guess one of the pieces that's also in this agreement, it says that it runs with the land and it's going to be binding on any subsequent purchaser of the proposed development. So I think that's a really key protection for the community, for the town. And my thought was maybe, I don't know. I don't want to. I'm trying to not give too much direction here. I certainly want to respect the will of the board, but we could have a work session in 2 weeks. We're planning on that anyway. And I had talked to Rebecca about working on these types of agreements, spending a little bit more time. So perhaps you could do a condition, giving yourself that option to develop that agreement, at that date, after you understand it a little bit better.
You can continue the hearing for a month too, and allow the applicant to finish some of the, to revise some of the details in the plan rather than handling them as a conditional approval as well. And that would allow us some time to discuss this at our working meeting.
I think it's important to note that it's this type of development, and I'm not speaking pointedly at this developer, this applicant at all, but it's this type of size and scale of development that I think this type of agreement is really aimed at. So if we're going to start using something like this, I don't want that to sound pointed at all. So, Will, I saw you raise your hand. I didn't want to say that we think that you're putting us at risk, because that's not what we're saying. We're just trying to cover our bases here.
No, I understand. And, this is something that I think may make sense for the town. I think that it's hard to bring it up at this juncture of this project when Mike has, invested a very substantial amount into this thing, and it's not how, it's not how Plymouth has been operating in the past, and so it's just I don't know. I think that it wasn't how I don't want to speak for Mike. I don't know if he wants to chime in, but I just think that the implementation of a performance bond and, those things have a lot of cost implications on a project. And you look at it and you say, well, he's the big developer, but it's not really, there's a lot of money that goes into these things. And he's got a lot invested right now, just with me sitting here and the work that's been done to date. The wetland impact permit, all the conservation easements that he's giving the town, along with the $10,000. I mean, I just want to make a case for Mike, because I think that, I'm sure that he would entertain those development agreements moving forward. If that's the way the town's moving, we're going to come back to you for the buildings in the future. And I just don't know if it's the right time to be adding this in at, when we're at a hearing at the end here. This is my 2 cents, I guess.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that us not being ready for this agreement and having this many questions, delay the applicant a month because of that, would probably not be fair to the applicant. And if there's a work session in a couple of weeks, we think about down the road. And the history of this applicant with everything that they've done and followed through, I don't have much worry with this particular applicant. So.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that point. And it's not necessarily this applicant that I'm worried about, but it does follow the property owner. This is a tricky one, and I think we need a work session to talk through this a little more. So I think that brings us to the question of either continuing this, and I'll remind everyone that in the state handbook that we certainly are encouraged to, this is the state planning handbook, encouraged to take as much time as we need for an application for approval. So we're certainly not always accept the application as complete and then approve an application that night. That's not always how we operate. So, and I'm not saying I'm trying not to also lead the board into any decision, because this needs to be a group decision on how we move forward. What I'm hearing is, I'm hearing a few people that say that we could implement the development agreement tonight because we have the town attorney. I'm hearing others say that we need to maybe work this through in a work session. Is it important enough to try and get something like this figured out for this application that we want to continue? And the other thing this is sort of a multi-part question. Are there enough conditions that we're putting on this approval that we want to, that we need more information before we're able to issue an approval on this? Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said earlier in the meeting, that Mike Vignali had so few issues with the plan that he kind of felt, boy, they're ready to go. It's just these small things that need to be finalized on the plan. And I feel very comfortable giving conditional approval so they don't have to come back in a month and more expense. We're not at the point where we're talking about traffic and buildings. We're just talking about the pads at this point. And I think, to me, it sounds reasonable for a conditional approval.
What do other folks think?
Is that a motion, Mike?
Sure.
June, go ahead.
I just want to suggest one additional condition. I mean, probably have to kind of revise what you're thinking of for them, but or review, excuse me, what you're thinking of them. But I did not include in my recommendation construction inspection, and because that is in the development agreement. So I would strongly suggest that the board consider adding an additional condition of approval requiring that at the applicant's expense that they work with the town's engineer for construction inspection.
I would be fine with that.
Thanks, Mike. And I think I just want to get kind of we have a motion to approve with conditions. I think if we get a second, we'll make sure we're all on the same page with those conditions, I think, because there's a list of them.
I'll do the second.
Okay, so second from Phil. Discussion from the board and clarification on some of these conditions.
Rebecca, would you mind reviewing the list of conditions that you have as of now?
Okay, my list is not great. So we have all state, federal, and local permits, including the alteration of terrain, the driveway permit if the construction is happening in the right of way, the review of the conservation and trail easement, and the construction inspection. And we are granting this, we would be approving it for 24 months. So until February 18th, 2023.
Do we want to ask for escrow monies in advance for the town engineer inspections?
Yes.
Okay.
June, yeah, okay.
Can we determine that amount later? Is that something you can do, June? Okay. I would support the so we've got a motion in a second, and you've got the conditions, and Will has a comment.
Yeah, I see that. Go ahead, Will.
I just have a question or clarification on the engineer's inspection. So that just sounds a little bit like an open checkbook to me. Can we clarify what you're asking for in terms of the amount of time and effort you're gonna, request Mike to pay for? Because if I had to send an observer out there full time, it would be a big check. So I'm just, I think if this is a new condition too that has never been implemented, in the past we've always had walked the site with Mike Vignali towards the end of the project. We do punch lists, we provide an as-built plan, and our work, we do inspections on behalf of Mike, for the state and provide those reports. But I guess I'd like some clarification around that, if that's going to be a condition of the approval. That's all.
Go ahead, June.
So no, I did not mean full-time construction inspection.
Nor did I.
Yeah. So I think, at maybe specifying at a couple times during the work being done, or we can try to establish some milestones. It's a little hard because I'm not knowing the progression of work and all of that. So, but maybe 2 times during construction, and then a final, like you said, wanting to do the punch lists and having those as-built created would be important to assure that compliance with their review and the approved plan.
So 3 inspections. Sounds like, yeah.
Can we put a limit on the amount of money that these inspections might cost?
I think if we're setting we're setting the, 2 inspections and a final, 2 visits and a final inspection. I don't know how much that's going to cost. I wouldn't even be able to ballpark that. So I think if we're setting the parameters on time, we're essentially setting parameters on money as well. So.
The town has an agreement with the town's engineer. I actually saw it in my office. I can't remember where, that sort of sets a rate for, that what we're doing with the town's engineer. So, inspecting it a couple times would be, him coming up a couple times and spending a few hours there. So I don't remember what his rate is, but it's probably a few $100s an hour. And so it's not a huge amount. The final inspection might be a little bit longer time period in reviewing it. So
My thought is also, they can't get any type of building approved for that site until it meets what the specs are on that plan. So it would be pretty important for them to follow that plan. So do we only really need the final inspection? Because to save the applicant some money, it still protects the town that we get what they said they're building.
The in progress inspections are going to check to make sure that erosion control is being adhered to and things like that, that is also protecting the town. So I think that's kind of important. So I don't know.
On the erosion controls, the site will be monitored and reported on weekly as a part of the construction general permit as well. So they will have a stormwater pollution prevention plan in place. It will be monitored weekly and after storm events, but that won't be a town representative. But anyways, just chiming in there.
Dude, if I throw out $5,000 as an escrow amount, do you think that would be sufficient to work with? For the town engineer to cover at least a final inspection?
Or not to exceed?
Not to exceed $5,000. Well, if we're going to require an escrow, it has to be a defined amount.
Can we set up the not to exceed as a condition, and the escrow, we don't have to determine what the escrow amount actually is, right? We can just say it's not going to, that can get worked out between Mike and June and Will. Does that make sense?
I'm okay
Right,
with that.
McGinley, does that make sense? So we're just setting a limit for our condition.
I mean, we've never, not that I know of, we've ever set this upon an applicant before. And that's a lot of money. And I'd be a little concerned about that.
June?
We used to do construction inspection periodically during construction of some sites. Years back know of that. I have evidence in the files. When going back to your question of when development agreements and these types of escrow accounts were last used, I would say it's probably been 4 or 5 years, but there's definitely evidence in the files up to maybe 2015, 16, where working with the town's engineer for this type of work on a variety of projects. I know back when Walmart was built, we had somebody come in regularly and give reports to the town about the progress and kind of double checking.
I think it's something that we just haven't seen at the planning board level.
Correct.
So we just haven't seen, it hasn't been something that we've discussed. I think it's great that we're talking about it.
Yeah. I think, again, the last time it was used was probably around 2016-ish. So
Rather than burden, so we have a motion and a second on the table. We could revise and say, rather than burden our applicant with an unknown, surety request, we could table this and spend some time looking into this on our own.
And continue this
We could.
to the March meeting.
Yes.
My thought is, if this is something we're unsure about, then I hate to put it on the applicant's shoulder and delay them a month. And if we haven't required this type of inspection and this type of escrow in the past on this site, I would say we set a precedent. Maybe we should look at this on our own and decide where we want to go with it, rather than put it on the shoulders of the applicant tonight. And I would still like to keep my
Your motion.
my motion without any monetary cost to the applicant. If we want to send out our town engineer to ensure for the safety of our town that it would not be on the shoulders of the applicant at this time, but that we could send them out at Mike if we wanted to, at our cost.
So a couple things that I think that any applicant coming before us should never expect to get an approval the night they bring their application to us the first time. That to me is just something we need to make sure that's something that we're always thinking about, and applicants should be aware of that. I know that very rarely has Riverside come to us and we've approved it in the first night. It's taken some time before. But I do agree that the things that are holding us up right now seem to be more administrative on our end rather than issues with the applicant. So I don't know. I'd love to hear some other voices on the planning board on how we want to proceed on this. Mary Ann?
Well, I definitely agree with not expecting an approval right away. I think the precedent that we're setting actually is not that we haven't been thoughtful, but we're making sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. So I would prefer that we hold off for another month to allow us to work through some of the things that we're dealing with right now.
Thank you. Other comments from the board?
So the motion at hand is conditional approval. And if we don't issue conditional approval, we can consider, we can
continue this to our March 18th meeting.
That's Mike McGinley. Can I speak up?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm on the phone. I've listened to some very good points, disappointed in certain areas, many areas, quite frankly. But the most important one is what some very good gentlemen have mentioned. I would ask the board to consider how the town has benefited from the first phase, when I was not addressed or required to meet performance bonds, the town gets approximately, I do believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's over $300,000 in property tax from everyone there. Phase 2 is sitting there as a wooded parcel with a potential of approximately, if I had to guess, 200,000. When we come out of this COVID, I think the project will take off. I think the town needs as much activity as possible. I think this will help. As Will says quite well, and as the other Mike, whom I don't know who it is, I'll give land away to make this work. I will pay $10,000 to the Conservation Commission to make this work. But I am concerned about getting hit between the eyes with things at the end. And for those that voice that opinion, I agree 100%. This is just not fair. It will prompt me, in all probability, not to do anything as far as getting involved in the easements. If we're putting this thing off 30 days, why would I invest more money in hopefully getting an approval for this project, which simply, in its most simplistic form, is digging a hole and making the site look attractive so that we all can reap some rewards? I would probably probably receive advice from council to do nothing and see what, I don't want to say problems, but see what awaits me at the next meeting. And as I've often been told and say to other people, this is not Florida. Time is valuable. We need to keep the wheels of progress moving. This is spring. So in my world, we're approaching fall because we still got permits to get. So I think, quite frankly, with all due respect to everybody, I think this is a surprise to a guy that has put 12 or 13 years on this site. And to get this at the very end here, or actually the beginning of a project, I think is disheartening. And I would hope the board reconsider and be a little bit more cordial to someone that has proven himself to the community, that does not live in the community, lives in Guilford and continues to drive up and to try to make something good out of a very, very, very difficult piece of property. I think I've said enough. I hope I didn't offend anybody. That's not my intent. I sat quietly here at the house, just hoping that everything was going to go relatively good. And I hope I made myself somewhat clear, with nervousness that I recognize this is a interesting project. It is not that difficult when you have the correct people around you. You have an engineering firm that has done 90% of the projects, the buildings on phase 1 without any problems. Mike Vignali never had a problem with Horizons, Mike McGinley, or Bud Crane. And Bud will be in charge of doing the work on this. So I would ask the board to reconsider. We do not need to be putting this off, in my opinion. It literally is going to put me in a quandary as to what we do. And I don't think that is advantageous for anybody at this point in time. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. So to the board, we have, just trying to get it, we have a motion on the table. We have some other things to consider. I think our options are as follows. We approve tonight with our standard conditions in the way that we've always done with no construction inspection. We can approve with conditions, including the construction inspection, up to a certain dollar amount, or we can continue this hearing to March 18th and take our work session to explore the construction inspection, which would be a part of your standard development agreement. So I'd like to just get a sense from the board what we want to do to proceed.
Well, we have a motion on the table. We have it seconded. And it, in my motion, says that we can have our town engineer do any inspections they want, but that does not involve at this point the applicant paying that fee. And in all my years that I've been involved with the town, that's the first I've ever heard Mike McGinley speak ever at one of the meetings. And he's exactly right. He's always followed through 100% with everything that he said. This thing's been in the works for at least 3 years with the donation of that land. And that's something that that the Conservation Commission is 100% behind. And
okay. Hang on, I'm gonna just stop right here. I think, so I wanna just get a sense, we've got a new board. I wanna get a sense of, because I think if we were to, I'm not even sure if we've got a motion on the table, we have to take a vote, or can we sort of acknowledge what the board would like to do at this point? I'm not even sure.
I think as a matter of procedure, we have to have a vote, but we can need to discuss the motion.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion on the table. We need to have a vote. All right, so the motion is to approve with the conditions, but not including any developer funding, any applicant funding for a final inspection. Is that what your motion is, Mike? Or did you add the condition that it can be the construction inspection is funded by the developer up to a certain dollar amount?
I did not include that.
Marianne?
Does that include the development agreement, Mike? I didn't think so, but I just wanted to double check.
I didn't feel that it's ready for that. We're not ready for it. And I don't want to feel like we need to hold up the project because we're not ready.
June?
I just want to add that, when we talk about our town engineer, it's a consulting engineer that we bring in hour by hour. It is not a town staff member. And I do not know of any money in my budget for the next year where I have any funds to pay any engineering to do this type of work on behalf of the town. That's not typically provided in our planning budget. So if we were going to have the town pay, when you say a town pay for it, we don't have anything in the budget to pay for that.
So I would take that, I would be willing to remove that item from my, Phil,
Amend your motion.
from my motion. Make it simple and more traditional of how we've treated this applicant in the past.
In my history of other planning board activity, performance bonds are usually something that's determined, in consideration of approval, and or even escrow money is for inspections, or can be made conditions of approval. I think until a board has a good sense of what's involved in a project and things that, what the town attorney or town engineer might find or might be interested in evaluating. It's hard to know what those costs are. It's not something we can put into our application fees without understanding what the project is. So, that being said, I'm in this situation. I appreciate the history that Mr. McGinley has established with his existing development. I think he certainly has the fiduciary interest in moving forward with this in a positive way, as the tenants on his current development would be negatively affected if he were to abandon this or somehow not execute well. So, I think the town is fairly safe in terms of him moving forward. And there's certainly an opportunity for the town engineer to do inspections at the next phase when they propose buildings. So, on one hand, I think it's okay for us to add, be in the habit of requesting of escrows for inspections, but at the same time, in this situation, I'm comfortable moving forward without.
Okay.
I don't want to steal all the oxygen in the room, so somebody else feel free.
The motion on the table is to approve the application with the conditions of permits, the addressing the comments from the engineer, and the easements. And those are the only conditions we have on this approval. Am I, June, go ahead.
I'm really sorry to jump in. I just want to, my recommendation, since we're talking about this, was to have the town's attorney review the conservation easements.
Okay.
And I feel that so it's kind of the same thing, having that outside review would be more efficient to have him do it than.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did get a cost estimate of $600 for that work. So that would be held in escrow, and we'd use that in funds to hire John Radigan to do that work.
Yeah, that is pretty important, I would think. So, okay, so to review the easement, the town attorney will review the easement as part of the condition. Is that how everyone is understanding this?
I look at it, he's making a donation of 2 plots of land to the town for the use of our residents, and to then turn around and ask the applicant to pay for our attorney to review it. That might be a little bit far for me to understand when someone is being that generous to the
So
town.
to be clear, the easements are given as part of the wetlands permit because of a impact that we're experiencing in this town. So it's part of the impact that's happening on this site. So it is pulling land out of potential development as mitigation for impact. So that's a requirement of the wetlands permit. I just want to make sure that is clear. And the town has to consult with council in an easement because they're being held to a legal agreement. There's no way we could proceed without that. And it seems like this is part of the development package.
But he's also donating, is it $10,000 to the town? And so we're going to get that cash at some point. And I think maybe that would be a good use of some of those funds.
June?
That $10,000 is to monitor the conservation easement after it's established, not specifically for that. It's not because there's costs that can happen with that. So that's not for monitoring the easement prior to it being established.
I've got my motion, and if for some reason it doesn't pass, then if you want to add that in on the next go round, but I'm not ready to add that cost in for the applicant, whether it's 600 or not.
Okay. So your motion does not include the
Escrow money.
attorney being paid for by an escrow account established by the attorney, by the applicant. Is that right, Mike?
I'm willing to listen to June, and I'm willing to listen to Phil.
Again, I don't have money in the planning budget for that kind of review. So I think it's either you have the attorney review it at the applicant's expense, or you don't do the review.
I'm going to vote nay and move that we continue this, just to let people know where I am on this. I think we need time to resolve this, and I think it's unfortunate that we're asking the applicant and the owner to negotiate, be part of our negotiations here.
I agree with you, Phil. Thank you. Other board members? So there's a motion on the table. If there's no further discussion, we need to take a vote on that. So I will read the roll. Phil.
Rebecca, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm. My wife would definitely. My wife would definitely say I'm a little slow here, but just before I vote on this, can you just explain exactly what I'm voting on one more time?
Yes, no, this is good. I'm going to need to take a quick break after this, and I'm hoping to do it after the vote, so I might be trying to rush things a little bit. Sorry about that. So the motion on the table is to approve the application with the condition of all the permits that are required, a adherence or a addressing of all the 4 issues that the engineer brought up in his letter, and then a review of the conservation easement, but not with the applicant paying the attorney fees through an escrow account. Okay. Is that any other questions? All right. I'm going to read the roll then. Starting with you, Phil.
Hey,
I lost my agenda, which has everybody's name, but I can see everybody. Mike,
I vote yay.
Marianne,
Nay.
Carl,
Nay.
Mark,
Aye. Yay.
I was
And-
I. I'm not sure if I mispronounced. I am an I. Yes.
and John.
I'm going to say aye. I do think these are important issues. I just want to say I'm saying aye. My connection has been going in and out for the past like 20 minutes now. I've heard enough. I do want to say aye. With
Okay.
I also want to say I definitely want to have these very important conversations.
I'm going to say nay.
what about Carl? Did Carl
Did we
vote?
get Carl already?
Okay.
So I wasn't even counting, so I don't know what the results are.
I missed it. No do thumbs.
Okay. All right.
Mike, you are a yes.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 downs, 3 ups.
Okay.
Can
All right. So
will-
I need to take a quick break. I'm sorry. I will be back in about 95 seconds.
All right.
How about them socks? I'm just kidding.
I didn't even know you were still there, Bill.
Oh yeah, I'm still hanging in there.
When do pitchers and catchers report?
I have no idea.
There's John.
I think I'm in 2 places now. Oh,
I only see one of you, John.
There's another John right there too.
Yeah, there's two.
Oh,
yeah, I'm
All
on
right.
my phone and my laptop.
so if you're ready, I will move that we continue this until March 18th.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. So I will read the roll. Marianne,
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Mark, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Mark. Sorry.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
do we still have Mike?
Mike.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, there you are. Everyone's in a different place now. Mike.
I would vote nay on the continuance.
Okay. And I'm going to vote aye on the continuance. All right, so we will continue this to March 18th. This has turned into more complicated than I expected. So I think we've got some stuff to talk about. So
I would like to thank Will for his excellent presentation tonight. And thank you to Mr. McGinley as well.
yeah, and just I would like to say that we're a very new board at this point. This is certainly the biggest application most of us have seen in a while. We have a new staff support. We're really kind of tightening things up here and really trying to make sure we're doing best by the town of Plymouth, which really is our charge. So this is certainly not reflecting upon the applicant or his agent or anything like that. But we're just trying to do our best. So.
Okay. Is there anything in particular other than the thing? I mean, basically, we'll try to iron out the stuff with Mike Vignali. Is there anything else you'd like us to do between now and the next hearing? Make sure we're prepared.
I think it might be helpful to have kind of a estimated trail zone. I mean, I guess the trail is on there, but some sort of like trail easement to be within a certain distance of that line roughly. So it's something that's going to be reflected in the trail easement as well. So is that enough direction for you?
Not really. I mean, you want to see it depicted on a plan. I think that we just would prefer to, I mean, that negotiation, is that a part of the planning board approval, or is that more like what we need to work out with the Conservation Commission in the town?
I think the trail easement needs to be a condition of approval.
Well, sure. Executing the trail easement. Absolutely. I just mean the details of like what it looks like and all that.
I'm okay if it's not on the plan itself, as long as we do. I don't know. What do you think, June? Or anybody else on the board?
Sorry. The reason I ask is just because I just want to make sure that it's well thought out. And I know that, the Conservation Commission in particular probably should weigh in and be the most involved. And I just don't know if we're going to have that much time to do that between now and next month,
I'm okay with it. Other folks, are they okay if the trail easement is, I don't know. I'm just not sure. What do folks think?
I would think the Conservation Commission would have a better handle on it than us.
Okay. All right, then it sounds like aside from the addressing the stuff from Mike Vignali, then I think we're in good shape here.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Will.
Where did I put my agenda? All right. Here we go. Next up is a continuation of a site plan review application from Fatherland Family Trust for construction of a recreational vehicle park with 19 sites on 5 acres, parcel number 213-028. We accepted this application back in December 17th. This is continued from our last meeting at the end of January, right? So I think what we've got is, I think we've got a lot of outstanding issues with this site. And I think I'm certainly willing to give the applicant a chance to discuss through some of those, but I think the biggest issue that I think we're dealing with is some sort of discrepancy between the acreage as presented in the site plan review and the acreage that we approved in the subdivision application. So any comments, questions from the board on this application before we invite the applicant to speak about the acreage? June, did I explain that correctly, that it was a discrepancy between the subdivision, the Mylar that was submitted, and the site plan review?
So I just, I can try to help clarify that a little bit. So we've had 2 applications for this site. One is a subdivision that was approved. No, I can't remember the date. And then you have now a site plan that is for developing this campground on one of the lots of the subdivision. So the subdivision hasn't been finalized yet because it needs to have a Mylar to be signed and go to the Registry of Deeds. We did receive the Mylar, and I discovered that the Mylar did not match what was on paper that you approved. So, but tonight we're talking about this. That's a separate issue, and I've been trying to write and have some correspondence with the applicant to point that out and asking that in order to have a subdivision, my latest correspondence around the subdivision application was basically, we need a Mylar that matches what the board approved, or if there needs to be a change for some reason, then that needs to come back to the planning board and amend that subdivision, and we'd have to have a new public hearing for the subdivision. All right. So that's a separate issue. I believe that what you're seeing on the site plan, that the acreage matches what you had on the subdivision that you approved.
Okay, so we can
Okay.
proceed with the site plan.
Yeah, so
because
tonight
it's
we did
consistent
not
with what we
notice this.
approved.
We did not have any discussion or any noticing about the subdivision.
Okay.
We had noticed back in January a hearing about the site plan application and continued that to this evening. So this is just about that site plan based on the acreage that was presented to you at the last, and I think the last ones that came in was in December before I was here. Since then, yeah, you had a set of plans received December 21st, I believe. And then since then, there's been some you had my staff report from January. I updated that for you for this meeting. And then just, I believe it was yesterday, we had one more sheet sent in that, to be honest, was I've only got it in a digital scan format that I just been reviewing that a little bit more today, that actually has some changes to what you saw in December. So things keep changing with this plan, which I have found very difficult in getting something yesterday for today. It's not in just a scanned paper, looks like a piece. It looks like a drawn plan that was then scanned to create a PDF versus a digital copy, which is what Will showed you, is a much higher quality view of it. So, but there's differences to what I sent to you just yesterday on this. I guess I take it back. We received it over the weekend. I apologize, on the 16th. It came over the weekend. So yeah, there's some changes in this that actually do that are just different than what you looked at. This seems to be an amended plan to what you last saw in December, and we're considering.
Okay.
So,
I guess I'm not quite sure even where to go from here on this one. This has been a confusing issue, and I guess I should even make sure that Mr. Carter, are you here? I think I can see you on the phone there.
It looks like he's muted.
Okay. I don't even know what he has to hit. I think it's like #6 or something like that.
Hello.
Okay, you are here. Just wanted to make sure you're here.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. I had called in earlier too.
This has been a long meeting. So, all right. I feel like I read all this right before the meeting, and then we've just gone through this other public hearing, and now I'm just trying to catch up on this. June, what would your recommendation be as far as just, I mean, I see the list, but there's a list of things that, in your opinion, we would need to be able to approve this application?
well, on my staff report, I listed a number of things. I feel like we still don't know anything about, to have a campground with an on-site, these are going to be hookups, as I understand it, with a sewer system tied into it. This new plan just received a couple days ago. I can't really read it, but it looks like now there might be a holding tank. The idea of a septic system and leach field area has been removed from that plan. So we don't know quite what that septic design and intent is. But furthermore, the state of New Hampshire, has some regulations about campgrounds, and they should be really looking at that. I mean, they do septic approvals. So we would want their approval, which we do not have yet, of any kind of, DES certifying that this design to handle wastewater is adequate. The layout of the pads for the campers, the recreational vehicle seems to have changed a little bit. There's a new service building and residence. It's labeled now in a different location on the plan. Actually, you know what? I think I have it. Let me do a quick screen share. Try to keep this short. This was the plan that came in. So again, it's very difficult to see it. But in this area right over here, if you can see my cursor, that says a service building and residence. One of my main concerns, well, first of all, we didn't know there was going to be a residence on this. That was a new feature. The original leaching area was somewhere over here. Now it looks like there's some kind of holding tank, perhaps. I just can't tell. This new plan no longer really shows the Baker River. It kind of cuts off some things on this side. The sign is on the other lot, which would make that sign a billboard, because you have to have a sign on the premises for where the business is. The driveway profile is here, but basically it looks to me like there's also a fair amount of reworking this material and fill. And one thing I really feel like this plan needs to show is where the floodplain is and the floodway. The floodway I had sort of sketched out a screenshot in that staff report, the shaded area, and you really, in our zoning ordinance says, you cannot do any encroaching or fill or removal of anything in the floodway without some kind of engineering analysis, a hydrologic assessment. That's what Horizons Engineering is going to be doing as part of their alteration of terrain. They will have that assessment that, by putting fill in here and compensating over here creates no problems for future flooding downstream or upstream. All right. We have you don't even know where the floodplain and the floodway are on this plan, actually. And you certainly don't want to have and cannot have any buildings in a floodway, which is supposed to be a channel of faster moving river in a flood. It's different than a floodplain. Okay. So I've asked, saying that should be designated on this plan so you can determine where those are and then determine if this layout meets the requirements for that. That to me is one of the most important one. And likewise, there's some work being done looks like within the Comprehensive Shoreline Protection Act, or the Shoreline Protection Area. So again, that would be the state to certify that that's okay. We've talked before about RVs, not being on site for more than 180 days. That should definitely be a note on the plan. There was a detention pond that seems to be gone. I don't know. There's a couple places where there was a drainage swale in here, but there's no design for that I could see.
Okay.
Drinking water system, we have no idea. The well was going to be over here on the other lot, which would mean you'd need an easement to have piping, but that may have changed. I can't quite tell. So I just feel like remains a lot of outstanding issues with this plan, and things have changed a fair amount. We have not proceeded with the engineer review because we keep getting changed plans. So my recommendation would be one of two things, is to deny the application because of these outstanding issues that have not been brought forth and satisfied by tonight, when we asked for that since the beginning of January. And it was our work session in January, we discussed this actually. Or if you wanted to continue this on, because we're at a 65-day deadline, we'd have to have agreement with the applicant to extend it for X number of days. But to be honest, I would ask that we get a whole new set of plans. Specify 2 paper copies, full size, 2 copies 11 by 17, because we can scan those and make copies more easily locally, and a digital set. And then we share that with the town engineer, get a cost estimate for their review of the plan, and ask the applicant to provide funds held in escrow for that review.
Okay.
And have it go to that level, because we just need to have this packaged better, one full set to understand what we're looking at, and then move to that next level. But I think the answer is still going to be, you can't do this kind of work in the floodplain, floodway area, and we have to have that designation on there. And then would need those kinds of engineering studies like we're going to be getting for the other project. So.
Yep. Okay. Other board members, what are thoughts among the board members? I will, unless Phil, were you about to talk?
I was going to say I'd rather hear input from other people before I share mine, but
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm waiting too. I'd love to hear some other voices about what we think.
How long would the extension be if we?
I think we could determine that I think it's a mutually agreed upon.
Okay, so there isn't some standard or?
No, because I mean, there's this, because this is determined by RSA, I believe.
The applicant can request any amount of extension, but without that, we can either approve or deny.
Yeah, the timeline is a burden placed on us to protect the applicant from us just, continuing this in, well into the future. Yeah, it seems like regardless of which avenue we take, there is pretty much the same, we're requiring the same thing. But what I see is the substantial changes in the plan makes me question whether we could even consider the application complete if we were to look at the plan we have now. I mean, we're kind of down this road. So I don't know. I'd love to hear what other people say before I offer my opinion.
I don't.
Can I speak on this?
I'm one second. I'm just kind of trying to take the temperature of the board here first. So
I certainly don't feel like we have enough information to approve at this point.
Yeah, I would just say it seems like the information is changed over the last 3 or so months, a couple different times. So it's hard to know what the full plan is because it seems to be changing fairly frequently.
I'm not sure what we would be approving, which one or ones.
Well, I would think that we don't have an approval on the table. I mean, I think these things, I mean, I've only seen one denial in my time on the board. So would we make a motion to not approve it? Is that how we would do it? Yeah, okay. So June, go ahead.
I just want to remind you, if you do make a motion to deny, you have to specify why.
Yeah. So we'll have a list if that's the case. But so I think that in my opinion, yeah, our options are, as June said, we're either going to not approve it or we're going to continue it.
There are too many question marks still about. I'm not even sure what we'd be voting on. There's been so many changes.
Yeah.
And I think we're just going to have to kick it down the road a little bit until everything's cleared up. There's just too many unanswered questions.
My other question, is there a different, I know that June has invested a considerable amount of time on this, as has Jules and has Brian. There's been a lot of staff resources that have been put towards this project. And I'm wondering, is there a difference in staff burden if we take one road or the other? I mean, I don't know if that necessarily has any bearing on our on our decision, but I'm just curious about that. Go ahead, June.
I can tell because I unmuted. I guess I would advise that, yes, we have spent a lot of time on this because of the nature of, asking for things, not receiving them, some letters going back and forth, and then getting things and just not difficulty reading them, having to go back and see what's changed because there's no report saying we changed this. There's not proper, usually, notes are written on a plan that update, amended on a certain date, and it kind of gives a little notation as to what was amended, and you see a series of amendments listed around the title box. Just things keep changing on this. So each time it does take a fairly significant amount of our effort. That's why I was going to suggest that if you do choose to proceed, set some firm deadlines of we want to get a complete set of plans that we would then proceed with some type of review. And I would want at that point it to go to our town engineer at the applicant's expense, using a process called an escrow agreement, and we'll get that going, and then bring it back to the board. But I think that would take a fair amount of time, and I can suggest that the engineer will have some of the same comments, and other ones too, lacking engineering details on this. But so I think it's somewhat up to you as a board asking the applicant what their sense is, being able to pull this together, and not let it go on forever, within a week or two, completing a full set of plans that then goes off for that review. Usually that review can be done in a couple weeks. So we probably would not be ready for you to look at the March planning board meeting. We'd be looking now at April. Be my recommendation on that. But again, there's still a lot that's missing. So can the applicant get those pieces together in the next 7 to 10 days?
Okay. Okay, Mr. Carter. So if you need a decision from us this evening, well, I can't tell you what that decision will be, but I don't think we can give you, it doesn't seem like we can give you an approval this evening. Of course, that's all pending board vote. And as June mentioned, if we were to continue this, would you be able to get a full set of plans with the specifications that June has listed, also printed on 11 by 17, also a digital copy so we can share it easily, not scanned in, because it makes it very difficult to read. Is that something you can do in 7 to 10 days?
No, I'd like to have an extension for 30 days, but I would like to address the board too. I've heard a lot of rhetoric about all these changes. There are no changes. The road is in the same position. It's always been on every plan for the profile and the horizontal and vertical location. I sent over 4 Mylars. There's no change in that. The only change has been is a typographical error. I think my surveyor is hopefully online. He said he'd be online listening tonight, and he was asked to be on. I had him stake out that road, and I walked that road with the planning board, if you remember right, and it has not changed. There's no change. The profiles I submitted a year ago are still the same for the road. Everything's the same. I would like to sit down with a workshop with your director, if you would, or with your engineer, because there's a lot of confusion going on about what the boundaries are. I hired a registered land surveyor. I hired a wetland scientist, and I can assure you there's no change in that road. That road is where you saw it. The stakes are still out there. And if I may, I can write to read you, or if you don't have it, if you want to read it, I'd like to refer to the site plan review application. Have you read my letter?
That has all been submitted to the board.
Well, what I'd like to say is that I've been working with the board for 2 years on this. I'm not asking for approval tonight, but I'd like some consideration as to the work that we've done, that there are no changes.
So what I,
There's a typographical error on the frontage. The road is in the same position. And I've gone further. I submitted a plan to the director and to the planning board. The plan she's referring to is a plan profiling utilities. It's not the whole plan. You have 4 Mylars of the whole plan, and they agree with each other.
we have Mylars for the, hang on one second, Mr. Carter. We have Mylars for the subdivision, right?
I don't know. Yeah, are you talking of the surveyor's plan or?
Sorry, that was a point of clarification. It sounds like we've got Mylars for the subdivision.
Excuse me, could you slow down a little? You're too fast for me.
Sounds
What do you
like,
want?
it sounds like we have Mylars for the subdivision. But we
You
don't
have
have,
Mylars for the site plan review, 4 of them. Sheets 1 through 4 with profiles, plans, everything is the same. There's no change, and there's no change in the road on the ground that you reviewed. The stakes are still there. They agree with it. And my surveyor is supposed to be online also. From what he tells me, there's a typographical error. If you scale the plans, they are in the same position. If you go out there on the ground, the stakes are still there that you reviewed. I can't be responsible for it if he had the typographical error and he wants to correct it. And there was also a problem with the original survey that's on file in the registry from which I bought this, and it's been on file for probably 50 years. He's trying to straighten it. He went back and did some more work and found some boundary original markers that are not recorded properly on the original plan and in my deed. So he's put them into this plan. But the concept of this road and the 19 RV units are in the same position. The road hasn't changed horizontally or vertically, and that's what you've reviewed. You didn't review a dimension on the front. I have over the 5 acres on each one. I have over the frontage. I originally had 3 lots. We dropped it down to 2 lots. This has been going on for 2 years, and I'd like to bring it to a conclusion. And I'd like to sit down and actually, your new director has not been up to date on this with us.
I'm gonna stop you right there, Mr. Carter.
If you may, I'm still speaking. Could I finish what I'm saying, please?
I'm gonna stop you right there, please.
Don't stop me. This is my turn to talk. I want to.
As chair, I'm gonna ask you to please just stop speaking for a moment. I've got some clarification that's coming in from the board. So, Mike, I saw your hand up.
Yep. Can I ask a question of the applicant?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Mr. Carter.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I heard you last month. And was there a change? Is there now a residence on the plot plan?
No.
That was not there before?
The service building would have the resident manager in it during the season. We moved it from over, and it's in the same elevation. It'll be above the floodplain, and that's the service building that he will occupy during the summer 6-month period to keep this place running properly and in order. It's not a residence full time. It's the residence for the manager.
So that's something new on the plot plan.
No, we had a service building, and I showed a plot. I was asked, it's probably almost 9 months ago, to provide a plan of the service building, and it showed a residence on the upper level. The lower level is the service area with the washers and the dryers, and it's shown on that plan. It's a full-scale plan. It's not a sketch. It's one sheet, and it shows that plan and a profile of the building, and it shows an area. It shows a residence on the 2nd level.
All right. I have one more question. Is there, how is the septic going to be handled?
The septic, matter of fact, he's in the middle of the design, and I took off the leach. We had a 4,000 square foot leaching field up there, and he went back and did some more perk tests, and he's designing the system. This is, it shows that there's not it says septic tank. H 24,000 gallon concrete septic tank, not a holding tank, and it will be pumped up. Every one of these will be serviced with a septic system that is pumped up to the same area, but he hasn't finished it, so I didn't show it on the plan. I hope he's on board.
Yes, I am,
He's
Joe.
also doing the design.
Yes, Joe, I am available
Oh,
here.
is this Steve Ferguson?
Yes, it is.
Okay, he's on. And first, if we may, could I please get back to the beginning while he's on the line, because he did all of the perimeter, corrected the plans that are on file that should have been corrected. They never were, but that's the way I bought it, and he straightened it out. So maybe
I don't want to.
Could you please? Could I have him explain what he has done? And if there's no change to those roads.
I would like to just, yeah, June, go ahead. You get your hand up.
I didn't hear that.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. I have a couple screens here to share with the board. So let me do that. So this, can you see this is actually in the Google Docs folder. This is the plan that, you know, one of the original ones that was submitted. So this says lot 2 is 5 acres and lot 1 is 5 acres. Okay, in this area, hopefully you can see my cursor. All right, just keep that in mind. So it was in this site plan listing acreages of 5 acres. So here you have the road. Here's where this leaching field area was going to be. There was a service building somewhere on, I think on another sheet, somewhere in this, like up in here. And if you look at sort of these configuration of these kind of rented lot areas, there was a detention pond, that sort of thing. All right. So if we go to this plan, which is the one just received a few days ago, that leaching field area is gone. There's now this service building residence is now over here, was not on the other plan. This is 5.6 acres. This says 5 acres. There's no detention pond. Oops, sorry, my my arrow's moving as I move the there's no the detention pond. The configuration of these things is a little bit different definition to them. Again, the water systems change, the septic systems change. So I just pointing out, to me, these are indeed changes to the plan.
And as if I may speak.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
As Joe had mentioned, he had taken off the septic system area in waiting for the septic design to be finished. But it's going in the same spot as that. So that needs to be finalized and sent off to the state. But there was it's part of this conditional approval that if he doesn't get that, cart before the horse a little bit. The fact about the boundary, I know that's a separate issue according to the board, the subdivision plan. At some point, I'd like to discuss that, but I think you're discussing just the site plan as it exists.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll talk about that after.
Yeah, so I think that what we saw in our previous application, I'm not sure how much you guys were able to tune into that, but I think it sets kind of a good example of what we're looking for as a board, and how when things change on the plan, that applicant had to come back and because there were significant enough changes that they had to represent their application to the board.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the site plan, not the subdivision.
Right. And so looking at, we would need to approve a plan, we would need to have the septic system on the plan. We would need everything to be designed as you intend to build it, and any changes you would make after our approval, if they're substantial enough, it has to come back to the board for reconsideration. So I think what we keep getting is incomplete, or not incomplete, is plans that aren't finished yet, and it seems like it's an evolution, and what we need to see is something that's sort of the design, and we can present or give an approval on a design, but because things seem to be changing, it's hard for us to offer any sort of approval or decision aside from a denial or a continuance, because we're not really sure what we'd be approving.
So if I may, before Joe speaks, so you're looking for an approved septic system design, or is that a condition of approval?
An approved septic can be a condition of approval, but we would need to see the septic on the plans themselves.
All right. Yeah.
So if I can, it appears that leach field, it appears that was not on the same parcel as the RV park either. I believe it was on the other parcel that was subdivided off. So we would also need documentation.
That's not correct.
No. Okay. I apologize. I forget where it was.
There was a septic system. There was on the topographic subdivision plan. It shows the 4K areas, one for each lot. Both lots are over 5 acres, so it doesn't need to go for state approval. So I think she showed, June might have shown you where that septic was on this site that we're talking, lot 2.
Yeah. Can you pull that back up for us, please?
It's going in that corner where the major angle point is.
If I recall, this was a 2-lot subdivision that separated a parcel from the road. And
the site plan is just lot 2, which is what Joe showed on the last one. Yeah.
Okay.
And the water supply, that is on lot 1, is that correct?
No, on lot 2 now.
It's on lot 2 now, but it wasn't the last time we took a look at this?
If you look at my correspondence, I've said that if we couldn't get adequate water, or that wasn't a good area, these are conceptual till they're drilled and you get the water supply that you need. And I have relocated, by talking with the well company, I've relocated, and it shows it on, if you look at the plan that's dated January 30th, 2021, it's a plan, profile, and utilities. So when you talk about first of all, skip over for a minute to the detention pond. The plan doesn't go that far. We're talking about just the utilities and the roadway on that plan that you say is different. And as far as the well goes, it shows the new well location on it. It's right behind, if you have that plan in front of you, the latest one, Plymouth, New Hampshire, Baker River Campground, plan, profile, and utilities. It's not a plan of the whole site. It's a plan of a portion of the site, which encompasses all of the RV lots, their septic system, their elevations are on the pads. The electric is shown, the underground, which is underground electric, and the sanitary sewer is shown, and it's for each one of the pads. It's not a complete plan. But the profile that's shown above is the original profile, so it's right in line with the plan below, so you can, with proposed elevations on it that you didn't have before, so you could review the plan properly. And what I assumed we were going to talk about was the concept of 19 RV lots and a driveway to it that you reviewed on the ground, and it hasn't changed. None of it's changed. But I've added information. I took off that septic system because where the leaching area is, it's still going to be in that same 4,000 square foot area, not getting out of it. We have 4,000 square feet, but he hadn't designed the leach field yet. And he had the tank in, the tank is shown, and the line force main going up to it, but he didn't have that information available, so we took it off of the utility plan until he submits the plan for the complete septic system, which he said he was hopefully going to have for this meeting, he hasn't submitted to you and to the state for approval. That's why I haven't shown it.
Does,
I've shown it all except for the leaching area, but the leaching area is in the same spot that he had it.
I think I can present a point of clarification, is that the plan that you had shown, June, is the utility plan, and it's a sheet within that, within the site plan package. That's why.
Four Mylar, excuse me.
Okay,
four
hang on
Mylar
1
sheets.
second, Mr. Carter.
Pardon?
June, go ahead.
Excuse me, I didn't get that.
I've just asked June Hammond-Roan to speak.
Okay, so if this is being considered one sheet in a full set of plan, this is where it's really difficult. I have no idea at this point what that full set of plan is anymore. And this sheet that we're seeing is different than the sheets of the other one in that that building is moved. One sheet's got the septic area shown. The utility sheet does not have the septic area shown. And we still are not seeing any designation of where the floodplain and the floodway boundaries are on this. And I think that's a huge issue on this for this development, because you're potentially going to be having a septic system designed and implemented into a floodplain area, possibly in a floodway area. I can't imagine the state for a commercial campground with this kind of volume of waste would want that. Drinking water system may or may not be in the floodplain area, floodway area. I don't know, because we don't see that designation of where the floodplain boundary is on the plan.
It's on the four Mylars that were previously submitted before you were here.
So those are those Mylars have to do with the subdivision plan.
No, I'm talking about the Mylars. I have 4 sheets of Mylars for the site plan review that was submitted.
I've got the paper copies, and again, we look at those in this sort of phase, and we've got one sheet showing something different than the other sheet with what you're saying. So I think that, again, the board should consider either actions we talked about. If there's gonna, we can't hash this out tonight. There either has to be a date set for a full complete set of plans. I would ask for 2 copies in the full size and 2 copies in 11 by 17 and a digital file of that. Then we're kind of starting with, this is a full set of plans. This is what we're going to review and make a decision on. No more changes to it. All right.
What do you mean by did?
And you can ask the applicant to, have X number of days to provide that and add in at least the floodplain and the floodway. So you can see where that is and whether the town of Plymouth would be in violation of zoning ordinance to potentially allow fill and other things within that area. You can't see where that is on the plan. It's not there.
Yeah.
So it's hard to be able to know the impacts of that. And there are ways to handle that, and that would require a substantial review and engineering of an assessment of flood impacts to do this kind of alteration of the site, filling the area, and to ensure that we're not going to have any flood impacts in an area we know that is a lot, and sites around it. So I really urge the board to try to move ahead in a constructive way, because we don't have the information here tonight in front of us.
Okay, so the options on the table for us.
Excuse me, could I speak again?
Hang on a second, Mr. Carter. So the options for the board are, we can, in my opinion, not approve it tonight and take a vote on that, or we can continue with the applicant's approval and set a timeline that we need a full set of plans all together in one package. That is the application that the plan that we will be looking at and considering for approval, with a number of other things that we list out that we need to have approved. What does the board think about those 2 options?
think option 2 makes the most sense to me. It seems there's quite a bit of confusion, and Mr. Carter's obviously trying to get us the best information he can, but at this point we just don't feel like we have all the information we need to make a decision. So that just like a logical move.
Could I make a suggestion?
1 second, Mr. Carter, I'm just trying to get the opinion from the board. Mike, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the 2 meetings that I've been to where Mr. Carter spoke, he's asked a couple of times now, and everybody gets things differently, but it's hard for some people during a Zoom meeting like this. And he's asked a couple of times to meet in person with the planner and find out, and I think that I would be willing to push this down the road another 30 days or whatever it is, if he could meet with the planner with his surveyor or with his representative, so they can know whether this is something that they go forward with or not, and get some definite feedback in person. That's my suggestion.
I think some of the confusion or the miscommunication we've had is it seems like we're presented with conceptual ideas but not full complete plans. So I think June's idea to submit a full set of plans that are good to go, that's what we're considering, and have that go to the engineer before we deliberate on it. But I think as far as meeting with June and any representative from the applicant, I'm not sure what the town hall, what the status of visitors in the town hall is these days. So, yeah, other board members.
I think we should consider Mr. Carter's request for what he would like to do in this situation. Considering that, we certainly need some information from him. I think we should ask him for an amount of time that he would request from the board as a continuation to identify and provide the needed information.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Go ahead. You sound like you were trying to say something a moment ago.
What I would like to request from the board, that I worked for 2 years with different plans with Brian Murphy, and we've come with a lot of good ideas that he had, and I think there's a lot of missing information going on between your new director and Brian Murphy. Could we have a meeting with Brian Murphy and your new director to go over what we've done and why we're where we are, and that I did submit the Mylars 4 complete sets. I also submitted the smaller one, 17 pieces, and I also worked with your the part-time director you had on it. This has been going on for quite a while, and I thought we had a good working relationship till now, because I think there's a lot of confusion of what went on. This has gone from a 2-lot subdivision. I had a 2-lot subdivision. I had a 3-lot subdivision, but everything is in the same place, and it's also the same concept. I moved the building on this latest plan, the utility plan, around the corner about 40 feet, same building, and so he could be in full view of the 19 RV lots. That's the only reason for moving it. It's at the same elevation, it's above the flood elevation. But I think I really need to sit down with somebody and go over this, because talking on the phone is hard, and reading letters is hard to decipher what we're talking about. But I did submit all this, and I did 17 copies, 4 Mylars, and I had it viewed outside. I don't think moving a building is a significant change. I mean, you move it 20 or 30 feet, that's a significant change.
So for us, we need to be seeing it seems like we've been negotiating even through this open application process. And for us to issue any type of approval, we need to have static
I
plans.
have a complete set of plans, please. I have a complete set of plans. I'd like to go over them with you and with Brian Murphy, because this is a result of working with him.
Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you to stop speaking again, please. Thank you.
Excuse me?
I'm just asking you to please stop speaking for a moment. Okay, so as a board, or I guess what I want to do is ask Mr. Carter if we need to get a complete set of plans all together in one package. Because of the nature of how things have been delivered, it's hard for us to tell what we're approving because things have come in even since we've accepted the application as complete. So what we need to see is the full set of plans, 2 copies full size, and in a digital format, also 2 copies 11 by 17, I believe is what June asked for. And there's a number of other things we need to see on that plan. And I'm asking you how much time you need if you'd like to continue this hearing, because the board, it seems in general, does not feel like we can issue an approval on what we have right now. So if you, the time frame we have, it needs to be set up by you. How much time do you need?
30 days.
30 days. Okay, so
For your next meeting.
So that means that we need that material in the next 7 to 10 days so we can get it to our engineer to review in time to get a response back before our next meeting.
You want him to review a driveway?
No, we need him to review your entire plan for the campground.
It's a driveway, private driveway to the road. It conforms to the contours of the land within a foot of any place. And it's a part. I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill, frankly.
So it's
And
not
I've been
just
around in the engineering, surveying, and development business for 50 years. We're talking about a driveway to a part-time use.
We need the full plan so we know what that
Okay,
use is.
I'll repeat the ones I have and give you the mileage. So the only difference is you're going to see the building, and that 24 by 42 is going to be in a little different location than it was. That's the big issue. The road, but I'd like to really, while we're on the subject, that I have the surveyor here, let's get it straightened out as to this is the same road that's been shown, it's the same road that's been staked, and I'd like to have an approval for that plan. You wanted the driveway permit from the DOT. I have it. I'd like to have it posted on the plan, and I'd like to have it recorded before I go any further.
So we need to approve the entire site plan review. So we're looking at this entire lot as everything that's going on there, all the development that you're putting there. So we need the septic, the location of the buildings, where all the campground lots are, where the detention pond is.
We're talking about 2 different issues. We're talking about the subdivision plan that you don't think is wrong, and you need a new hearing. I'd like to get it straightened out that the road is in the same position that we reviewed by the planning board and the public, and it's on the ground, still staked on the ground. That plan I want to record.
At this point, we're talking about the site plan regulation. We're not talking about the subdivision.
Well, if there's something different that you think is so important on the first plan, it's going to reflect itself in this plan. I think we're putting the cart before the horse right now. Why don't we get straightened out? I got the surveyor on the time. He's here. Let's also talk about the plan that is approved, and you wanted the DOT number, which I have, the approval. You have a letter of the approval. I would like to get that approved before I go any further with the site review plan. I don't have a subdivision yet.
So we can't, and Jim, please jump in if I'm not getting this correct. I think I got it. The subdivision application matches what we're seeing in the site plan review. So we can proceed with the site plan review. The subdivision is a separate issue for us.
Right, and I'd like to get it squared away tonight.
But right now, we've continued the hearing. So go ahead, Jim. Thanks.
Again, you guys approved a subdivision that had, for instance, on paper, the subdivision plan that you guys looked at, one of the main concerns I've had about that is it was 2 lots. Lot 1 was.
Excuse me, June?
Yeah.
Are you opening that up for discussion?
I'm just trying to explain to the board here what the progression of this is, okay? So lot 1 showed a lot size of 4.31 acres and lot 2 was 5.04, all right? The site plan shows one version shows 5 acres for both lots 1 and 2, and the lots 1 and 2 on this utility plan shows lot 1 to be 5 and lot 2 5.6 acres. All right.
Would you like me to?
And what you approved was 4.31 and 5.04. So what was on the subdivision plan that was approved does not match what's on the site plan. So it brings up one of the issues in bringing this up was now that there's this question about that there was an error made on the subdivision plan. So when they brought in the Mylar to be signed, it again changed. And I've been saying, I just can't say, oh, okay, it just changed. There's another change with easement and all that. But again, we're not talking about the subdivision. I'm just mentioning about this the subdivision plan that was approved has acreages that is different than what's in the site plan. So, but again, the site plan has multiple other issues too.
You allow Mr. Ferguson to explain the subdivision issue? Are you willing to do that, Rebecca?
I mean, I think we can. I mean, it's it's not. I mean, sure. If we want to hear that, go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
One point I was asking about the site plan was just digital. You mentioned digital copies of plans. What do you mean by digital? Are you looking for a CAD drawing on a computer? Because I don't think that's what has been submitted by Mr. Carter for the site plan. I know the subdivision plan was, and I can explain the subdivision scenario.
So as far as digital goes, we need something that we can see on a screen, right?
So there's not a digital requirement. You can, a hand-drawn plan or whatever that's clear is what you're saying? Because otherwise you'd have to have that possibly drawn all on CAD when I don't think that is what you're trying to, but I don't want to put words in my head.
No, I don't think we need something that is done.
You want that clear.
Digital format. We just need to be able to see it on a computer and read it and have it be clear. Is that what you mean, June?
I was just asking for a full set of plans with multiple sheets
that's
in 3 different formats: full size, like 2x3 or whatever, 11x17, and then just take that, and if you want to scan those and put it in a digital format, because then I can share it with the board. I mean, we could scan in the 11x17, but it wouldn't be as clear.
That's not a problem. So digital, you meant legible. That's
legible,
fine.
Yes.
I just want to run down that road.
But we just want a full set of plans, all the sheets.
Full set of plans,
with a title box, a list of the amendments that have happened, adjustments that have happened from day one to now, like a standard plan set will have a title box, list of changes and the dates, so we can trace through what we're looking at and what's there. Okay. In that set, if you want to address the things I've been asking for, in particular, locating the floodway and the floodplain, that would be extremely helpful in the board's review.
Right. Understood. So do you want to talk about the subdivision, or you want to wait till after you? I'm fine with it either way.
To identify if there is a problem with the subdivision before we move forward with the site plan.
I don't see it. I don't see a problem with the subdivision that you have. There aren't significant changes. You have same parcel of land. You have 2 lots. You have an easement going through. You have applicable frontage. So what's different is the numbers on the plan. The area that you go with a mention of an area. We have the site plan is representative of the actual subdivision boundary information. And actually the site plan, the plan that was recorded previously that Joe was talking about was an error. And so between the time the original subdivision was put through and now the error was discovered and corrected so that the latest plans that you have, June, are the subdivision plans. So I guess what we were just trying to determine was, you were saying that was a significant change, and in the previous case, I was noticing that you were talking about significant change when this is, as I've seen it in the past, is merely housekeeping. What you approved was 2 lots that have areas, frontage, and the easement going through. That this is just fine tuning that and getting those areas down. So there's no, we didn't reconfigure the lots in any different way, didn't multiply it out. So I really don't see the significance in that. That would require going through and having a new application for the subdivision, a new application or a new public hearing for something that is, I don't see as significant, as a substantial, how was it put before? A substantial change.
So it's my understanding that if there is we can't have a difference between what we've approved as a board and what's recorded with the county. Like those have to match, right?
Right, and that would be signed by the planning board chairman at that time. So what you approved was a subdivision of 2 lots that looks just like this. And like Joe was saying, the road hasn't changed. So this is the same plan with just what I consider the housekeeping difference, you know?
I guess I'm concerned with whether the county and legally they're considered housekeeping differences, and or if these are actually.
They don't have recorded plans. So what is it? It had conditional approval, I believe, right? That you approved the subdivision plan?
Conditional upon, receipt of Mylars, and the Mylars came in different than what was approved.
But not a substantial, you're seeing that as a substantial change? I agree.
I haven't seen them.
Right, but
I can't say if it's substantial or not, honestly. But my understanding is that the Mylars are not what was presented to the board, and certainly the subdivision application has proposed acreages of lots. If those are not matching what's on the plan that we're going to propose, then we didn't have a hearing on what you're asking us to record.
But we're also discussing a parcel of land that has that's going to have area changes due to the fact that it's on a body of water. So you're not going to have to the square foot. You're going to have acreage too. So we basically get 2 lots that are over 5 acres. I think when you look at the plan, you'll see there's not a substantial change. You might not even notice the difference. You will if you overlay it. I did have a number error. I had a Scribner's error on that I fixed since the Mylar. And I guess you'd have to look at that. I guess I'm asking the board to take a look at the difference between the plans and to see if there's a substantial enough change to have it go through that, as opposed to just having the planning board chairman make that decision and sign it. It's something that it's not unusual that this has happened. That's all. So I think for a whole new application for that, there's not much of a for the subdivision. I could just go on and on about it. You'd have to take a look at it, and that's what I'm asking the board to do, is to take a look at the two. And if you decide that's substantial, then I would like a definition of substantial so we can do that, you know?
Okay. All right. So I think we need to look into that further. But that's not necessarily the issue on the on
Right.
hand right now. So
It
I
was
think,
opened up, so that's
Yeah.
all.
but no, it's helpful to hear that a little further. So if we can get a complete set of plans with the list of things that we've asked for, so all, stack of plans, 2 copies, full size, 11 by 17, and a high quality scanned version that we can look at on a computer, within, you think 10 days, June? That should give us enough time for engineering review to continue this to our public hearing on March 18th.
I think, well, our application deadline for the 18th is the 25th, which is just a week away. We can shorten that. Typically we need some time to get things together. So today's the 18th, if we got the complete set by the 26th, and the thing is, I would need to send the plans to the engineer and then have a cost estimate done for the plan review, and then set up an escrow agreement, get the funding for the plan review from the applicant. That could take a couple days. And then, that's going to happen pretty quickly, but as long as the applicant gets us the money, and then we engage the engineer to do the review. And, so depending on how long and I don't know what his work schedule is. So if we got everything by next Friday, the 26th, and got the escrow funds and got the engineer started by March 5th, he really just would have like 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days in order because we would want to try to get information to the planning board by Friday, the 12th for the 18th meeting. You understand?
Yeah.
So it's long-winded.
Yeah. So
I don't know how fast Mike McNally can work. And there's other things going on in the office too. So we can try, but it's gonna, I would want to get that packet. But again, if there aren't these additional details added to the packet, to the plan set, it's going to make it that much more difficult for the engineer to do the review and take longer.
So I propose that we ask the applicant for an additional, I don't know, put us to the date in our April meeting, just to give us a little bit of a cushion in case there, it just seems like we got to have everything working like clockwork, and that's assuming that, June and other town staff have nothing else going on. So, Mr. Carter, would you be willing to extend
April 15th.
So what is it?
April 15th.
Okay. Would you be willing to extend your application? We'll keep it open. We'll continue this. We can aim to continue it to March 18th, but we're asking you to give us another 2 months before we can render a decision.
I wouldn't have a problem with that at all, but I'd like to also square away my plan so I can record my subdivision. And if you want, I'll withdraw the campground until such time as I get my approval of my subdivision of the lots. I have an approval on file and waiting for the DOT permit, which we'll have. So I think I'd like to put the cart in front of the horse. In other words, I have a subdivision. I'd like to get it squared away. There's been a if you lay the plans on top of each other, you will see the road is in the same position on the plan as it is on the ground. You've been on the ground. The public has been on the ground. I would just like to see a subdivision so I can go forward.
Okay, so
could I go one step further and say the plans are substantially the same, and if you lay them on top of each other right now, you'll see the same. You've been out in the field. You've walked the whole road with me. Can I get just an amendment and have a vote for the plan has some amended dimensions and it's approved so I can record it?
We need to be looking at that right now. We haven't been prepped for that information. We need to sit down and look at that. And it's the acreage difference that is the issue. That's the issue, is the difference in acreage that we approved versus what is on the Mylar that we have to record. I can't sign something that isn't what the board approved. So
Is there something wrong with the subdivision?
They're saying it's the area, Joe.
Well, the area is over the area required, so why is there a problem?
The acreage on the approved subdivision does not match what is on the Mylar that needs to get recorded.
Throw the Mylar away. And
the area
you have the way to plan.
is to a water body with an approximate, and that moves. The river moves.
I think there's a reference
What I'm
line.
trying to say is that we have the area. He's a registered land surveyor. He's certified to the area that he's given you.
Okay.
The other one was based on partially of a plan that was recorded back before he was even born, and was trying to straighten out the dimensions. It's
all right,
the same plan. What's the issue with the subdivision plan?
Okay, I think we need to cut this off now. So I need a motion from the board if we'd like to continue this to a date certain. We can continue this site plan review, or we can do a motion to not approve that. In my opinion, to not approve this application. The subdivision is not what we're dealing with right now. I guess I do need to open the public hearing as well, don't I? Maybe we'll do that really quickly. It's 9:26. I'm going to open the public hearing. Does anyone have a comment of any nature about this application? Okay, it's still 9:26. I'm going to close the public hearing. So we can continue this or not approve it, I think are two steps. Obviously, the subdivision needs to get worked out. We can, and I'm not sure what our next steps for that are. So
could we get a determination from the town council, and I'll pay him for it, that I have an approved plan? Not the site review, the subdivision.
I understand. Right now, Mr. Carter, I'm trying to address the board. So if you don't mind being silent for a moment. Mike.
So I would, I don't know what exactly the hearing was supposed to be on. I'm guessing it was the site plan and not the subdivision, but I don't think we needed another hearing to, he's trying to force the issue of he needs the subdivision completed before he can move on. Mm-hmm. So I would almost say that you as the chairman could sign that subdivision plan, which he's waiting for your signature, if you can get permission from the town attorney to sign it, that's difference is not significant enough to not sign it. I know that I own land along the river, and you can't even find a land marker along the river because the ice and the flow have removed it probably several times, and farmers put the markers back and then they get moved again. So that happens. So I'm saying, let's get the town attorney to say whether you can sign it or not. If we could do a condition on that for, I don't even know if we need a vote for that, but that's my 2 cents.
I think we need to sort of turn things through internally a little bit and figure out what our next steps are. Because I get the fickle nature of rivers. I understand the complexity there. But right now we're dealing with site plan review. So do we want to continue this to our next meeting?
I will move that we continue this until our meeting on March 18th.
All right.
Okay.
All right, we've got a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, good. Let's take a vote on this. Mike.
Aye.
Mary Ann.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Okay, and I am also an aye. Okay, so we have continued this site plan review to the 18th. Any site plan review stuff needs to get in by the 26th to the town for us to be able to move this forward, set up the escrow account, get the engineer to review. And as far as the subdivision goes, June, what are your recommended next steps? Do you think town council is the next step, or what are your recommendations?
Why don't I bring it to our work session
Okay,
and we can make that determination there.
okay, sounds good.
Can we take input from Mr.
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
I was going to suggest the same thing, that if the board wants to take a look at the, and make that decision, that determination themselves, and I could make myself available for the workshop meeting. So if you had any questions or whatnot, I don't know if that's, I know we've had in the past, in my past experience, we've either had when a planning board chairman wasn't going to sign the plan or wanted to sign it at a workshop. I don't know how you're handling that, but if that's an option that we can nip this in the bud at a workshop, I'd make myself available so that we could nip it in the bud.
I think maybe resolve the issue is maybe a better way to
Yeah.
put it. So, all right.
Terminology, I couldn't think of the words at this time of night.
No, I'm right there with you. Okay. So I would like to move on to bylaws. If we can, we've kicked the bylaws thing. I guess we have to do it because we said we noticed it. It's a public hearing. So we've got some changes to our bylaws. I'm gonna open the public hearing to have it for any discussion on our bylaws. It is 9:32. Okay, it's still 9:32. I'm gonna close the hearing. Any discussion from the board about our bylaws changes? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the changes to our bylaws?
I did notice one thing that I was a little confused by, but it's a minor issue. Under Article 6, Section E, I was expecting to see approval of the minutes, and they're not there. They are under the work session, Section F, but under Section E, approval of the minutes is not listed.
You know, I think that's a throwback to, we used to just only approve minutes at work sessions. I'm okay with proceeding as they are, and just considering the minute review that we do during a public hearing is, you know, something that we're adding to the agenda, if that's okay with the rest of the board.
I'm okay with that.
Fine with me.
Okay. All right.
I will move we approve the changes to our bylaws as written.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, good. I'll read the roll. Mike?
Abstain.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
I'll abstain as well.
Carl?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I am also an aye. Okay. Oh, I'm glad that one's the bylaws are done because we've been kicking this one down the road for months. I've lost my agenda. I am totally smoked, as I'm sure everybody is.
I don't think there was anything else.
Anything else, June, that we need to address? We have another hour before our bylaws state that we actually have to stop. So.
25 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
10 o'clock.
I'm running out of battery power anyway. So the one last thing, there was some unfinished business. I just want to mention planning board members, you know, obviously like Ahern's here, you know that as a new member. And we talked last month about our last meeting about the terms. So I will hopefully tomorrow get a letter together for the Board of Selectmen to adjust the terms of some of you as we had discussed last meeting. I just wanted to, so if you see that in the select board agenda, that's why. And there may be 2 other people have expressed some interest in being an alternate member. So we may end up with a full board here soon or close to. So,
And just so you know, I did re-up. I got an email from Kathy Lowe, so I don't know if I was approved by the select board, but I did send a letter. So
yeah, I think yours might be on the agenda for Monday night. I can't remember that. Sorry.
Yeah,
I just want to do it as one
last
package
time.
if we can, but if I may not have time to get to it tomorrow, we'll see.
Well, if they're watching tonight, then maybe I won't see you next time. But all right, Steve, you had your hand up.
Just wanted to get clarification that at the work session, we're going to come back to the zoning stuff as well. Because I don't think we've communicated with any of the people that have come to the 2 sessions when we were reviewing the zoning. And if we're going to talk about it at the work session, I think we need to give people a heads up in case they want to attend.
Okay.
I would move that we hold off until after, that we not tackle zoning in March, but maybe consider it for the April work session.
I would second that.
Yeah, I think maybe coming up with a bit of, I can't remember if we did this last time, but a bit of a work plan so we kind of know what we're doing, how we're going to reach out, who we're reaching out to, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I agree.
I think that's fine, but I think we're eating into a 6-month window that we have. So just be aware of that. And summer's always hard. So I'm just got to be the squeaky wheel on it.
That's good. I think that's important.
Week away, Steve.
And Rebecca, I'm going to rescind my second on that. I just don't think we're ready to be discussing that. But I'm going to rescind my second on that.
You're
To
on
hold it off
the
for a
zoning?
month. Yeah, I think it needs to hold off for longer than that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was if it needed to be an official motion anyway. Was that an official motion, Phil?
It was not. I mean, the agenda is set by the chair.
Yep. So, okay. So, I think we need to talk about our next steps as a board. And I think the work session is a good place to do it. And I agree that we need to get going. So, yeah. All right. Anything else from folks? Maybe a motion to say goodnight.
Do we want to entertain comments from Mr. Ferguson or questions?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see that. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
Yeah, just in the public comments, I was wondering if you could tell me when the work session is. So if I need to make myself available, I can.
March 3rd. March 4th.
March 3rd plus 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was so confident too.
And when Mike had mentioned the possibility of having Joe have a sit down with someone, it is difficult for him on this type of venue that with the COVID, it's very difficult to change anything other than, but it would be probably beneficial to not necessarily the elderly, but somebody who was having a hard time with the online stuff to have an option. I don't know what that option is. Everybody's in their own sealed booth and they can talk, but yeah. I think he's having as you could see, possibly having a difficult time getting his point across and just explaining that. Yep. So I can imagine some other people might have that same kind of issue as well.
We definitely recognize that, and these are challenging times. We're all doing the best we can based on, the threat that's real out there. So, so we're all doing our best here, but we recognize that, and we'll see what we'll talk about next steps. So,
excellent. Thank you.
All right. Who would like to do the honors this evening?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Mike.
Aye.
Marianne.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
And aye from me. Thanks, everyone. This one was a doozy. So.